the Minister of International Trade, and he's in charge of doing just that. Minister, welcome to Power Play.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Today, the Prime Minister talked about a new trade diversification strategy to develop new export markets. Now, the latest numbers show about 70% of Canada's total exports right now go to the U.S. So do you think it's realistic to think that we can supplant that kind of trade with other partners when you consider how intertwined we are with the Americans?
Mike, in talking to businesses across the country, in the past, I spent over 10 years in international trade before politics, facilitating trade amongst hundreds of businesses. And in the past, yes, businesses were comfortable dealing with a southern neighbor. You talk about some of the intricacies, very proximity-wise. It's easy to work with them, language similarities. But now at a time with global trade headwinds, businesses expect us to help them diversify. They're calling us now saying, how can I get into new markets? And so today's, launch of suites of tools to support businesses will help them diversify into different regions around the world. You talk about our $1 billion regional tariff response initiative, which will now allow businesses to, let's say you want to hire a salesman to get into the Indo-Pacific, or you want to get into a trade show that you need support with. And so we are launching tools and initiatives to make sure businesses have the supports to look into new markets. And part of my role as an international trade minister is, as Canada's top salesman, is to go and showcase these businesses and what Canadian industries have to offer. And so we've been out there making sure we're showcasing businesses, and we'll continue doing that because at a time of great turmoil, Canadians expect the government to be there for them.
But they also expect something to happen very quickly because, as we know, these tariffs have been in place for months now. So what is the sight line? What is the deadline that you're setting for yourself to try and make sure you are diversifying away from the United States? And again, I'll come back to the fact that 70% of trade that Canada does is with the U.S. That's not going to be a lot. It's not going to be easy to displace that.
Absolutely. Look, the U.S. is an important trading partner and will always be an important trading partner. But at the same time, I was just in Brazil last week talking about Mercosur and relaunching those discussions in October. What does Mercosur mean for Canadians? It would mean a market of over 250 million consumers, Mike, that Canadian businesses can then access. The Prime Minister was recently in Europe showcasing what our critical minerals or energy sectors. And so there's a lot Canada has to offer, and we will be out there promoting it and making sure we're signing new trade agreements and trade arrangements with different countries around the world, different trading blocs. And you're seeing that through what we're doing with CETA and CPTPP. But even when you talk about the defense industry, the Prime Minister mentioned investing over $9 billion in the defense sector. How are we helping building up that industrial capacity? How are we attracting investments into Canada to help grow that capacity? That's also an important factor in this. And the energy is there. We're getting calls. I'm getting calls from people that want to invest in Canada to help us do that because they believe in our workers. They believe in our industry, but they also believe in our government and the structures that we're putting into place.
You talk about Mercosur. According to a 2021 briefing note from your department, 49% of Canadian exports to those member countries in South America are subject to duties compared to only 8% of our imports from Mercosur. So what is being done to fix that imbalance and to truly open up that trade with that bloc of nations?
So that will be part of the discussions that happen later this year. I think it's important to note that the ambition is there not only on the Canadian side, on the side in South America, and that's what I heard from the Brazilians who hold the chairmanship in Mercosur. And it's important to note that they're ready to work through many of these challenges. Of course, we want to make sure within all of our trade agreements that we're standing up for Canadian industries and Canadian workers, and we'll do that, and that will happen throughout the negotiations.
Now, respectfully, your government was elected on a promise to make trade deals, diversify trade as well, and to do it quickly. What evidence can you point to right now that this Liberal government is going to be able to do that or is on track to do that?
Look, Mike, like what I can say is the energy is there. Right out of the gate, when I got appointed in May, I was in Ecuador to wrap up the negotiations of a Canada-Ecuador free trade agreement. After that, we hosted the UAE and we worked through our foreign investment protection agreement to make sure that we're able to attract investments. And those negotiations started back. And what was
Oh, Minister, I think we're having trouble with your connection. It feels like the minister's frozen right now.
Can you hear me?
Oh, and there you're back. I think
There
you're
you
back.
go.
Okay, and unfortunately, we missed part of what you said there, but I wanted to sort of go back on that number, the 70% of total exports that we have go to the U.S. I mean, realistically, how can you tell Canadians that we will be able to supplant that level of exports to an extent that we can diversify away from our largest trading partner? I mean, you even just said yourself earlier that they will always be our largest trading partner. So can we actually displace that?
They will be an important trading partner, Mike, is what I said. But I think it's important as we work forward and looking at arrangements with the European Union, with the Indo-Pacific partners, with our partners in South America or even in Africa. I think it's important that we leave no stone unturned. That's what Canadians expect of this government, and that's what we will continue to do. And so you've seen the energy with Ecuador, with our partners in the Middle East, now in Brazil, with Mercosur. There's much more to come, but when you talk about what's to come in the fall, you mentioned our trade diversification strategy. Within that falls our defense industrial strategy, because without exports, the defense industry will not be sustainable. And so there's many things that we're working on to support businesses and workers. But coming back to today's announcement, it's important that we're there to help businesses transition to new markets. And that's part of today's announcement made by the Prime Minister here locally in Peel in terms of our $5 billion strategic response fund, which will help exporters diversify. You talk about the auto sector, steel and aluminum that's being hit hard by these tariffs. In Brampton alone, I have the Stellantis plant in Brampton East in my riding that I represent that's currently shut down, laid off. And so those workers expect supports. And so the supports that we're providing today, transitioning and reskilling 50,000 workers, that is something that I know workers appreciate. I just got off the phone with Candice Lang, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, as you know. They're in support of what we're doing. Of course, more needs to be done, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
I wanted to continue to focus on your file, if you don't mind, because Prime Minister Carney did also talk about deepening those partnerships with the European Union today. Now, climate targets are part of the European Union's trade policy. However, since taking office, Mark Carney has dismantled some of the Liberals' marquee climate change programs. So do you think that could be a problem when we look to increase trade with the Europeans and they look at what we've done with our climate change targets?
Look, climate is very important. When you talk about what's happening locally, you talk about the young people in my riding that come to me about concerns around the environment. We will always be there to protect the environment. But at the same time, we need to look at, the economy and what's happening and the anxieties around the business community. And so, yes, when you talk about the EU, you talk about the carbon border adjustment mechanism that the European Union will be bringing in. But Canada is there as well. We have many responsible businesses across the country that are, taking into account the environment as they produce these world-class goods. And I think it's important that we don't shy away from that. Canada is seen as a leader in clean technology and clean energy. And so we have a lot to offer in that space, Mike.
So how does today's announcement on pausing and actually scrapping the 2026 EV mandate, pausing the full EV mandate, how does that fit in to Canada's climate plan, as you had said that it is extremely strong and attractive to other trading partners, when the EU may look at that and possibly disagree?
Well, when you look at the auto sector right now, Mike, you look at what's on their plate. They've got a lot on their plate in terms of what's happening in the U.S., the global trade headwinds, and we need to be able to support our auto industry. And so, at a time when they have so much going on, I think the government, we've stepped in and, we put a pause on that, on the 2026 EV availability standards, because we want to make sure we're there to support them as they retool, as we support them through this transition, because that is exactly what the workers and the industry expects of us.
I think nobody can disagree with the pressures and what the industry has on their plate. I guess my question continues to come back to, but how can you continue to wave the climate flag if you're deciding that some of the key pieces of the Liberal government climate plan, such as the consumer carbon tax and this EV mandate, those are now being dismantled? How can you continue to tell voters that you are the stewards of the climate and that you do have this top of mind if these two things have been dismantled?
Look, I think the climate and the economy can go hand in hand, Mike. You don't need to separate the two, and our government will always stand behind both. I think it's important that we support our industries as we transition to more cleaner fuels. You look at what we're doing with LNG. We're helping displace coal in the Indo-Pacific. Our very first shipment that went out from Kitimat, BC, I was there to thank the workers for building that facility, and that is really about energy, but it's also about our economic security. Because at a time when all of our energy was going to one country, we have now unlocked a whole new market. And it's important that we support industries like that, like clean energy. Our clean tech sector is world renowned, and we'll be there to continue to support them.
But are the economy and the environment going hand in hand if you are now moving away from some of those environmental policies?
I wouldn't say we're moving away. I would say there's a review going on right now, Mike. And I think at a time where the auto industry, like this isn't done overnight, this isn't done in consultation with the chambers, with the auto industry, to make sure we're moving collectively in the right direction. And our government will continue listening. This summer I spent talking to chambers across the country. I talked to businesses operating both here in Canada and, that are operating abroad. And they have come back and asked us for more certainty. At a time when our economy is economy of reliance, we need to be more resilient. And so the tools that we announced today is about resiliency. It's about giving tools to businesses to get through this difficult time, especially when we're facing global trade headwinds. The global trade is being impacted negatively across the board. The calls that I'm getting, people want to do more with Canada because we are seen as a reliable, stable trading partner, and we'll continue to make sure that we promote that. And within these challenges, Mike, we're finding a lot of opportunities, and that's why we're able to move so quick on some of these, Ecuador, Canada, the Middle East, and now with Mercosur. There is a need and a want for what Canada has to offer because we have world-class workers, we have world-class industry to build these products, and we want to make sure we showcase them to the world. But within that, we have the Buy Canadian policy, Mike. It's very important that we're able to showcase and support local domestic production, whether it's in the steel sector or aluminum or many of the other sectors, lumber per se, even our agriculture sector. We need to be able to support local industry so we can be able to get through this difficult time.
Okay, Minister, we're going to have to leave it there. The Minister of International Trade, Maninder Sidhu, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Mike.